honorable members of the jury, ladies and gentlemen. We all work to provide our families the best we can. We want our children to go to a good school and grow wise. We all want to have a decent job where our labor is respected and where we can feel proud of our work. We all hope to build a society where women are recognized for their invaluable contributions to the health and prosperity of our community. We come from many places, from Europe to Asia, from Australia to Patagonia, and from across the border to the Amazon. We are a community of migrants, and we all have come, in some cases, generations ago, seeking a better life. We now enjoy the gains of those who struggled before us, and we take pride in this. But new families and workers continue to come to these lands, helping making it a better place. They too deserve the opportunities that we have enjoyed, and they too wish to contribute to the improvement of this society. We live in the homes they help build, we eat the food they pick, and we cherish being able to work and play while they care for our children and our families. Every year, thousands of migrant agricultural workers from Mexico come to Canada to work in the Canadian fields under the Seasonal Agricultural Workers Program. Their contributions to Canada's economy are tremendous. They work for up to 15 hours a day, 7 days a week. They pay taxes, employment insurance, and contribute to the Canadian pension plan. Unfortunately, they are not treated with the dignity or respect that we think every worker in Canada must have. When these workers face sickness, injuries in the workplace, or abuse from employers, they are virtually alone, their own government rarely defending them. The Mexican consulate of Vancouver in particular, whose offices are in this building behind us, has a practice of giving the workers workshops when they arrive to Canada, telling them that if they complain about their working conditions, cause trouble to their employers, or speak to anybody other than their employers, they will lose their job. Many workers have in fact lost their jobs and have been blacklisted because they sought help, got sick, or asked, if I can find my page, questions about their rights. That's why the Mexican consulate of Vancouver and some employers have been sued by the United Food and Commercial Workers Union and the Agriculture Workers Alliance before the Labor Board on May 9, 2011. During the hearings, the Mexican government has claimed diplomatic immunity and is betting that this will allow them to remove themselves from the case. And so today, we host this community trial to hear the case of blacklisting of migrant workers by the Mexican consulate. Our jury panel includes Jeff Meigs, counselor from City of Vancouver, Joy Hartman, a labor leader, Nikki Sharma, also from the City of Vancouver. We stand in front of you pleading that these workers should be treated with respect and dignity. They have suffered enough. They contribute to our society day in and day out. Before we ask the jury to give us their verdict, I would like to hear from the consulate, the Mexican consulate's lawyer, how they can defend their decision. How can they justify their indefensible the position that they have taken over the years? Mr. Lawyer.
Thank you. Well, I see what you're doing here. You should be ashamed of yourselves. You're just making emotional arguments saying, oh, poor workers, they're suffering. But they want to come here. They are very happy that the Mexican consulate is bringing them here. My most distinguished client here, who is obviously helping other Mexicans to be here, he's too busy, really busy helping Mexicans all over Canada. Very distinguished anyways. They are certain that this blacklisting issue is nothing but a smear campaign. It's a smear campaign against a government that is fighting the good fight. Fighting back home and fighting it here. Most certainly they are, for example, fighting and winning the drug cartels. Except, of course, when it's inconvenient to the cartels, maybe they don't know where to go. But that's another issue. That's in Mexico. They are bringing Mexico to the forefront. And so you only have to see what they're doing in Mazatlan, for example, in Cancun, in Puerto Vallarta. It's prosperous. And so the Mexican workers who come here, they're very happy to come because, let's face it, they make dollars. What do they have to complain about? Like, they might be treated a little bit different, but they bring a lot of money back home. For example, whenever we bring them back home when they're sick, when they get injured, they always say thank you. What better care can we get than back home? It's better to be with your family than go to some hospital here that you don't know. So they always say thank you. They say thank you when we bring them home. So this blacklist, really, there's no blacklist. All we want to do is to have a record of the workers who got confused. They're confused and they think they're Canadian. So they think they have Canadian rights. But no, they're Mexican. So we want to know so we can train them. We want to help them understand that they're Mexican. And ultimately, we are very happy to be friends with Canadians. Our main goal as the consulate of Mexico is to be friends with you, because we know that by bringing cheap labor, you enjoy cheap food. And therefore, it's in your interest that we do this. We're doing it for you. We're helping you have cheap food, and you don't have to worry about it. In closing, the workers are Mexican, so we're going to treat them as Mexicans in Mexico, so we're going to deal with them. They don't have a right to be here in a court in Canada. They're not Canadian. But this obviously affects our interest, because you're saying that our image is being tarnished here. So we're just here to make sure that the record is set straight. Mexicans are happy to come, and they're happy to call us, and we're happy to help them. And that's the way it is. Thank you.
Members of the jury, for rebuttal, you have seen the lawyer for Mexican consulate in Vancouver has absolutely miserably failed to make his case. You know, we are in the public court. We are here to talk about workers' rights. People who come here every day, every year to work hard and have an honest job. We in Canada believe that any worker who arrives here in Canada must be treated equally with dignity and respect. So far we have seen, instead of the government of Mexico and the consulate office in Vancouver, they have failed to defend these workers. It should be their right. It should be their right to live in Canada. If they're coming here to work, they should be having all the rights like other workers. So we ask the jury to listen to workers pleading that they have made their case in front of you. We hope you will come down with the verdict which is supporting workers' rights. Thank you very much.
Well, can you hear me okay? Okay. I've listened carefully to both sides, and I don't want anything I'm about to say to anyone to feel that I'm simply being critical of the consul because of his terrible tie. That's not the reason. I'm listening very closely to the evidence here. I know from my own research and study that the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms is applicable to everybody here. There's no subsection for Mexicans. There's no subsection for temporary foreign workers. There's no discount version for people who are here to help us work in the fields, produce our food, and support us in that way. So I start first from that standpoint, that the rights and freedoms of Canadians are for everybody here in Canada, not just for certain people here in Canada. The same thing is true for the Labour Code. If you study the BC Labour Code, you'll see there's no low rent section. There's no temporary visitor section. There's no section of reduced rights for employers seeking workers from offshore. There's a single set of rights that apply to all workers who are employed here in BC. And in fact, any employer who is seeking to bring workers to Canada to work in BC has to declare up front that they will understand and respect the laws of this province. It's not legal, for example, to ask a temporary foreign worker or an agricultural worker to perform unsafe work. No worker has the obligation to perform unsafe work. It's not legal to pay them less than the minimum wage. No one is required to take less than the minimum wage. So I've listened carefully to what I've heard here, and I have to say I'm not persuaded by the arguments of the consul in this case. Not only because of what I've heard today, but because of my previous experience meeting and talking to workers from Mexico and other Latin American countries who had similar experiences. I think that Canadian employers, the ones who are seeking to exploit workers, do a pretty good job, unfortunately, and the workers who come here need the support of Canadian organizations and Canadian unions. So I would recommend that this community court find that the consulate is guilty of blacklisting in this case.
Thank you very much. I too listened very closely to both of the counsels. And of course, we as the jury are charged with reviewing both the evidence and the credibility of the cases that are being put before us. And so the Mexican consulate's lawyer has told us that these workers are happy to come to Canada. I have no doubt that that's true. But what I do doubt is what the conditions are that they are faced with when they arrive. And so we've heard evidence of case after case of people who are working in very dangerous conditions, who are living in housing that is completely inadequate and completely crowded, and the list goes on and on. And so when we look at that evidence, then we turn our minds to what's the nuts and bolts of this case, and it is that workers who dare, after having attended these workshops, to inform them that they should not talk to anybody but their boss, and that they shouldn't complain, and that they better not get sick or they'll be sent home. The evidence tells us that these are not idle threats. The fact that we are told that people are happy to go home on airplanes rather than attend a Canadian hospital informs us that the consulate is in fact carrying through on those threats. If you get injured, if you are hurt, if you get sick, you're going to be sent home, and that's the end of your job. And that list that informs them just who happened to be sent home, make sure that they never come back again. And so the findings, I think, and we must also measure this with the issue of credibility, and I'd say that, you know, it speaks for itself, just look at them. But, you know, I think that we did hear enough evidence to inform us that we have also a problem with the Canadian government, because while we can only deal with the charges in front of us today, I think it's imperative that we also acknowledge that the temporary foreign worker programs, the guest worker programs, do mean that workers are, by simply the programs that they come into Canada on, are exploited. And so we say, I say as a juror, good enough to work, good enough to stay, and we need to ensure that the inspections are happening and that the workers have enough people making sure that they're properly cared for and have an opportunity to air their grievances when in fact they have some. So in conclusion, I'm persuaded as a juror that the case has been made, and I recommend that the Mexican consulate be found guilty as charged in this community trial. Thank you.
I've also considered all the evidence, and first I'd like to thank my colleagues for their very thoughtful view of all the evidence. And also I'd like to just state that I find it offensive that the lawyer from the Mexican consulate took this matter so lightly, and just wanted to say that, and presented himself to us in this way. I want to start by saying that every worker in Canada is entitled to dignity and respect. Every worker has the right to work in safe and good conditions where their work is valued and respected. And every worker has the right to access Canada's system to help alleviate bad working conditions and protect them during their stay in this country. The Mexican government should be protecting the citizens who contribute so much to our country every year, and not threatening them and putting them on blacklists if they try to obtain better working conditions for themselves. Therefore, I find, after considering all the evidence, that the Mexican government is guilty, and I find with my colleagues. So.
So I want to, on behalf of the public, on behalf of all the workers who are working in our fields day in and day out, want to thank the jury for their thoughtful consideration of the evidence and coming down with a verdict which reflects the reality, what's happening out there. We asked the Mexican Consul General, consulate office here, to make sure there is no blacklisting of any workers. Workers come here, they have the right to be here, they have the right to have a safe workplace, and every right that other workers here in Canada have. So thank you very much for members of the jury. Thank you, all of you, for coming here. Thank you so much.
Well, I think the jury obviously is biased, but let's hear from the people, because I think the people respect Mexico. They like to come to Mexico. So maybe let's raise their hands for everybody who thinks that the consulate is not guilty. Like, I convinced you, of course. So I guess nobody will raise their hands if the consulate is guilty of blacklisting, right?
Raise your hand if you see the consulate is guilty. 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 Stop blacklisting. Stop blacklisting. So let me read the declaration to you before you sign it. Agricultural Migrant Workers' Rights Proclamation by the Community of Vancouver, a proclamation where on the 23rd day of May in the year of 2012, a proclamation was issued by the community in the city of Vancouver, British Columbia, containing the following to wit, that agricultural migrant workers and other temporary workers are an important part of our community, working long hours in Canadian fields, harvesting our food, contributing, subsidizing our economy and culture, and thus are valuable members of our society. That employers, farm owners included, are responsible for equal treatment of its workers without discriminating due to the workers' race, religion, nation, or of origin, or any other reason. That embassies and consulates of migrant workers' home countries in Canada represent their nation and citizens' interests equally. These diplomatic representatives ought to see that within the context of agricultural migrant workers in Canada, all workers are respected and supported whenever they are in need. That the Canadian government and all its institutions must enforce all laws and regulations, especially when these are designed to protect the most vulnerable members of society. It is the duty of all members of government to be vigilant and to make sure those who break the law are brought to justice. Now, therefore, we, the Canadian community, in joint effort with the community, labor, religious, and grassroots organizations, by virtue of the power vested in us as members of this community, and in accordance with our role as guardians of the well-being of every single member of our communities, either permanent or temporary, and in recognition of our own heritage of migration and cohabitation of these lands, ancestral territories of Indigenous peoples, do hereby publicly proclaim from the day above mentioned the following. Agricultural migrant workers' rights must be respected and are equal as any Canadian workers' rights. Employers and farm owners must adhere to fair labor practices, offering safe and human conditions to agricultural migrant workers, respecting their universal right to associate and hereby be part of collective bargaining. Embassies and consulates where migrant workers are originally from must demand fair labor conditions for its citizens while in Canada. In the specific case of the Mexican consulate in Vancouver, their blacklisting activities are wrong, illegal, and cannot be allowed to continue. Thereby, the Mexican consulate must be held accountable to stop the blacklisting of Mexican temporary workers, and Mexican officials must be brought to justice. Canadian institutions and officials must adhere to Canadian law and must make sure that all members of our communities abide by them. Therefore, it is imperative that the Canadian government takes action in protecting the rights of migrant workers that are being trampled by the Mexican government through its consulates and embassies in Canada. We, the community, invite all members of communities where migrant workers reside, be them permanent or temporary, to join us in recognizing their contribution to our lives. When they harvest the food we enjoy, take care of our loved ones, or provide services, and we call for the vigilant protection of these workers' human and labor rights, which in turn is protection for our own Canadian laws. As we address the challenges of our time, it is imperative that we as communities pressure our Canadian government to make sure that all other governments adhere and respect Canadian laws and regulation, in witness whereof we have raised our hands and signed this proclamation this 23rd day of May in the year of 2012.